What's up YouTube? Today we are looking at Sonible's new Smart Comp 2. So this is an incredibly intelligent compressor, but apart from its kind of AI learning technology, it's also just a really good compressor with a great interface that's slick and super easy to read, and it also just sounds good. So I want to run through most of the features in this video, and I want to try outline why I think this is such a good compressor. So before diving in, I'm sure we're going to have some of those use your ears bros type of comments. And yes, of course, ears are obviously very important when producing music or creating music or doing anything with sound. But it does help to have a kind of guiding force to be able to kind of guide you in the right direction. Specifically for those who might not have the ideal listening environment. Something like this that can help you kind of pave the way to learn more about compression and that kind of thing, I think is really cool. Anyway, I just want to give a big thanks to Sonible for making this video happen. They did actually send me the plugin for the purpose of this video. However, they're not altering my opinions or anything like that. I was actually interested in the plugin before they contacted me. I've been checking out their Smart EQ, which I've got a video coming up on as well. I've been checking out their Smart EQ for a little while and actually considering purchasing it for myself. And then they contacted me, so I was actually pretty stoked about that. Another thing I also want to mention before getting into the video is it seems that the makeup gain or the auto gain system in the plugin is a little bit broken. So there may be some instances in the video where the gain matching is not 100% perfect. I'm going to try to do as best as I can in post-production and editing. That being said, people from Sonible, if you're watching this, it could be cool to maybe fix the auto gain or, maybe clarify exactly what's happening there. Anyway, let's dive in and have a look. So in this context, I've got a mix that I've already finished up, or at least, you know how it is, tracks are never finished, but I guess I'm happy with it. So I'm going to kind of use this plugin in the context of mastering, but that being said is, with compression, it's such a vast topic that I kind of don't want to give you guys, numbers that you can copy to create your own masters, because that's not going to work. It all depends on the context material. But I think it's a good way to be able to outline, all of the features within the plugin, because the context material is very full frequency. So you guys are going to very easily be able to hear what the different things in the plugin are doing. So that being said, if you are planning on looking for like a mastering tutorial or something like that, this is not it. But that being said, this plugin is absolutely usable in the context of mastering. So I'm going to try and outline that a little bit today. But again, more about the features and less about how to do it yourself, if that makes sense. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to look at using the plugin just in a traditional compression context. Say for example, we have certain peaks which are dipping a little bit high above the signal, and we want to even those out a little bit. So I love the fact that the interface is very visual and very readable. I think that's incredibly important in this day and age, and it's bizarre that we haven't seen compressors with this much kind of feedback and control in terms of what we're seeing on the interface. I think there are a couple. I think Focusrite did one, but I feel like it didn't quite capture the essence of a advanced compressor plugin as much as Smart Comp 2. So anyway, I'm just going to play the audio so you guys can see what's actually happening with the visuals as we tweak some of these parameters. So I think for me, a really, really important factor is the fact that you can actually see exactly where on the waveform you're actually cutting the threshold. I know this is such a small thing, but for very quick workflow, often you don't want to have to put on a dB meter, read the dB of the signal, apply a plugin, put it down to that threshold, and then tweak from there. Having the visual approach just makes that kind of setup process much easier. If you know that you only want to carve off a particular amount of peak, so say for example, if you look at the signal, you can clearly see there's a kick which is that sharp peak, and then the rounded kind of bass peak. Say, for example, we only wanted to affect the kick, but not the bass peak. We could kind of fine tune this till we're just above that rounded part, and we're just capturing just the tips of the kick drum. Do you see that? Just those spikes that come through every now and then. And often this is a combination of like a hi-hat or a snare and a kick, not the kick itself. Because often we're kind of matching the levels of the kick and the bass, during the production. But like I said, being able to quickly see this, quickly apply a threshold that's going to work on just that target sound, I think is super powerful. So here's something also that's really cool is this delta parameter. So what this allows us to do is hear only the affected sound. So now what we can do is we can put this on and we can listen to what we're removing in the compression. So can you hear that? It's just those little peaks that are dipping above. So this is helpful for, say, for example, like, we've now figured out we're removing too much of that like pumpiness from the track. We can go and dial that in, dial that threshold in with the delta enabled. You see, we're not capturing too much of the body of the kick and the bass sound. We're still just kind of gluing those kind of weird, every now and then it's get that like synth sound or percussion sound that sticks out of the mix. We're just gluing that back in again. So another really interesting thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overdo the compression a little bit here so we can hear a little bit more of what's actually going on when I start to tweak this. What we can do is we can actually just drag this 1 over to the 2. And what that does is it creates a new state. So this is a really cool workflow. Say, for example, you get to a point where you like it, but you want to tweak it more, but you want to have a point where you can jump back to. So now we've duplicated the state of the plugin. So we can now start tweaking this. And then, say, for example, we've like overcooked it. We can just jump back to 1, delete the state and stuff. So it's a very cool compression workflow because often you do overcook it and you do need a kind of step back somewhere in the workflow that you can quickly just jump to and then try it again until you find that perfect kind of sound. So anyway, let's talk about what's called the transfer function. So this is almost like the envelope of the sound, the kind of curve that the compression applies. So this orange line over here, this actually allows you to customize the transfer function. So I believe when you go further down from the curve, it kind of applies more of an attack, so you get more transient in. So this can be a little bit dangerous, particularly in parts of the track where, in like a full mix, because where you have like a break where the stuff cuts out, suddenly you're going to have this kind of much louder sound, and at the first kick it's going to be like you're going to really hear that transient. So I'll make an example here for you. Do you hear how that first kick is much louder? So like I said, in a mix context this is not very useful, but we can use this in a kind of transient shaping context in a sound design thing, for designing kicks. Say, for example, we have just one sample and we want to really accentuate that transient. We can kind of fine tune the transfer function here to do that. So like I said, it's much more useful than just a bus compressor or a mastering compressor. It's like a really kind of clinical compression tool that can kind of deal with all types of dynamics processing. So here we've got the knee parameter. This basically determines how much curve there is at the threshold. So this is going to be more apparent if we actually turn this part of the transfer function down. So you can get crazy clinical with the type of compression and where it kind of curves in. So you can, like I said, do these kind of weird transient shaping type of things. Like I said, not as useful in the mixing or mastering context, but having these at your disposal, super useful. So let's just hear what this sounds like. So getting too advanced with it, can actually be quite dangerous. You can create peaks that might cause trouble later on down the line. So I don't recommend doing too much of this editing of the transfer function unless you actually know what you're doing. Like I said, having the tools there, if you need to use them, super handy. So let's just delete that state and jump back to the first one that we created. This was the one which I think we, kind of sounded pretty good. Okay, so let's dive into the actual smart part of the plugin. So how it works is it basically analyzes the audio, and then it kind of adds much more parameters which you can kind of tweak to fine-tune the sound. So some of those parameters are a spectral compressor, which apparently is something like a 2000 band multi-band compressor, but it's super clean. So I mean, like for example, let's use these kind of settings that we have at the moment. So we've got different kind of algorithms to choose from, but to be honest with you, I generally just prefer sticking with the universal, especially for kind of more electronic genres. A lot of the stuff I think is more useful for, singer-songwriter type of stuff. But that being said, is being able to learn the signal and then apply spectral compression, input riding, and certain other things like that I think is super helpful. So let's just use this. We click the button and then we press space to start the learning process. Okay, so once you've learned the signal, you can see you get this bottom panel that opens up over here, the Spectral Comp. So we got various different styles which you can choose from, which kind of change the tonal balance. Color also changes the tonal balance, but then this changes the amount of compression or spectral compression that gets applied into the signal. So what we can do is we can actually press delta to listen to what's actually going on here. So do you hear how the kind of dirty style of compression is a lot more upfront and loud, while the clean style of spectral compression is a lot more open and transparent? So I like to kind of dial it somewhere in the middle, dial this amount down a little bit so it's not as apparent, and then just fine-tune the actual threshold and ratio to get that kind of desired sound. So the input riding, I guess this is, again, it's dependent on the signal, This basically, what it does is it rides the gain of the input to always be at a nominal level. It's kind of like gain staging the plugin automatically, which is interesting, very helpful in certain contexts, like, for example, recording like a live bass guitar or a live guitar where you have these very wild fluctuations of volume. Again, in a mixing mastering context, I don't know how useful it is, but having the tools at your disposal, allowing you to use them if you need, again, very good, very, very good. So let's just see what this sounds like. Specifically here, you can hear that in this part of the track, there's these breaks where the beat comes out and it comes back again. It's in those parts where you'll hear the effect of the input riding the most.
The laws of time and space.
There's also a mid-side mode, so this allows you to actually tweak each of these curves individually, which I think is super cool. For example, if we want the mid channel to be super clean, which is obviously usually our low-end content, the stuff that's mainly in focus, like the percussions and that kind of thing, but we want to squash our side channels a little bit to kind of increase the presence of the stereo field. You know, we can do that, and we've still got this kind of clinical control over the dynamics. So we can just use these different curves to kind of dial that in. Let's say, for example, we want more of a knee on the mid channel. We can dial that in, and we want more ratio on the side channel. With compression, a really handy trick is to kind of overdo it, you know, really kind of push the sound so that it's like really kind of pumping. Then you dial in your settings, and then you reduce the amount of compression that's going on, either by reducing the input gain or just by reducing the threshold and ratio of each of the bands. So this is a nice way of being able to hear like what the envelopes of the sound are doing, fine-tune those with the like transfer functions and stuff, and then reduce the overall amount of compression, and then you can really get that kind of fine-tuned, like professional compression sound. So it can also accept a external sidechain input, which is pretty cool. And what you can do is you can actually filter the sidechain input. So I believe what can happen is we can actually use the traditional signal as the sidechain, filter out the top end like this, maybe like peak the lows. And so we're kind of like carving out just the kick drum and using that as the trigger for the threshold rather than the entire track, and this helps to carve more of a pumping sound into the mix. See, if we audition just the sidechain input, then we can kind of hear it's just that low end. And now what we can do is we can use this. Let's maybe reduce the amount of compression on the mids channel and use just the sidechain to compress just the side channels.
The laws of time and space.
And then if you feel like you've overcooked it, you can always jump back to the kind of settings that were predetermined here, or just reanalyze the source. Okay, so I'm sure there's going to be some of you out there who aren't too interested in the electronic music side of things. So I prepared a couple of examples that are a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So yeah, these are made with all Kontakt libraries and stuff like that. If you want more info as to what Kontakt libraries there are, then just leave me a comment and I'll try to pin something. But anyway, I'm trying to focus more on the actual compression and stuff in this video. So with this type of genre, like I said, it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I'm not really used to working with compressor on like a drum bus of acoustic drums, for example. So having specific guidelines is definitely going to help to get you where you need to go much quicker. For example, here what I did is I just used the drum bus setting. I used the smart filter, and then I just fine-tuned the spectral compression to my taste, a little bit more kind of aggressive. And then I fine-tuned the threshold and ratio to my taste, and then this is the final result. So what I'm hearing is that the kick and the snare are punching a little bit nicer. There's a little bit better of a transient happening there, which is a bit closer to what we kind of want with the more aggressive metal kind of sounding drums. The toms are also a lot more in control. I find without the compression, you can kind of hear these vast differences of volume, specifically with those toms. And this definitely sorted that out very quickly. And then the only other instance of smart compression Smart Comp 2 that I used in this project is on the actual master bus. So here you can see I used one of the actual smart filter presets. I used the mix metal and then just let it use the smart filter, and again just dialed in the smart compression and then just dialed in the spectral compression and the threshold and ratio to kind of suit this particular track. So let's hear what it sounds like pre and post. It's definitely adding a much more pronounced transient to the kind of more aggressive tone that we're looking for this kind of mix, which I really like. You know, I like the fact that we can, myself who's kind of dabbling in this is not my comfort zone, I can quickly dial in a mix that I'm really happy with. And then, you know, fine tune the settings from there if I need to, you know. That's the other thing with these kind of, with these things is you're not limited to just using the kind of like smart tools. You can fine tune it to your needs, or you can just bypass the whole smart system altogether and just use it as a kind of good compressor or good EQ, because it's got all the features that most of the other stuff on the market has. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting that like button. I will see you guys next time. Cheers.